Hi, everyone. And joining me now is Nancy Dahl to talk about a really important topic today. Nancy, thank you so much for being on with me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, can you tell us, first of all, give us a little bit of background. Where are you now? Kind of what is your situation, your living situation?
I'm living in Wyoming, in an apartment.
Okay.
There's it's a pretty high cost area, so I was
In Wyoming.
finding
Now that surprises me. I thought it was very inexpensive to live in Wyoming. Maybe not,
it's,
huh?
it's very expensive to live here. I live about 40 miles from Jackson Hole, so
Oh,
yeah,
okay, very good. Yeah.
apartments are very expensive.
Okay, a premium, I guess, on places near any ski resorts, right?
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Now, Nancy, I first got to know you a little bit because of my website, Oldpocalypse, and my YouTube channel. I did a video on an issue which was of great concern, and that was that that elderly people, especially older men, were starting to were committing suicide at a very high rate, and it was a big deal. Now we'd seen a real spike in this kind of thing. Now you made a comment on my Facebook page, my Old Apocalypse Facebook page, talking about your time working at a nursing home. So that was where I wanted to find out more because it is my understanding from another video I did recently that nursing homes, the statistic I heard about that I reported on was that when people move their parents typically into a nursing home, that it's common that it automatically, like statistically speaking, subtracts 5 to 7 years from their life, which was shocking to me. Now, you mentioned in your
Believe
comment
that.
that you had worked in nursing homes. Can you give me a little background about that? How long ago was this? What were you doing, and how long ago did you do that? Anything you feel like you can share?
In the early '90s, in Memphis, I worked at that point. It was a nursing home. It was like a daycare for the elderly.
Hmm.
And I was the activities director, social service director, and we would pick up the elderly, and basically it was a daycare. And I worked there for 3 years. And then later on in the '90s, I moved to Missouri and worked at a local retirement home where I was the same thing, service director, activities director.
So you were right in the middle of all this, then, Nancy. I mean, you were responsible for making sure that the seniors there, that the elderly were being, I guess, entertained and were kind of trying to live, as much as they could, have a kind of a life while they were there. Is that accurate to say you were essentially giving them activities?
Correct. And basically, when I was not doing that, I was still on the floor checking down on patients. It was a pretty sad situation.
So if you how about how long in total would you say that you were responsible for elderly in these homes? Like how many years if you added it all up?
Probably about 4 years. It got too depressing. The last retirement home I worked at, it was just too depressing, too overwhelming. The care that the patients received was pretty deplorable.
Now that's what I was going to ask you. What was it that caused you to leave? Was it just too hard on you mentally eventually? What were kind of the big factors?
Um, it got to be too hard on me mentally. The patients, the nursing staff was subpar. A lot of things went on that was not reported. It was just really a sad situation. Seeing the people, and then I've had a couple of relatives in the nursing home, and it's just no place that I would want to be.
Right, right.
These people do not understand why they're there. A lot of them have dementia. The nursing home, the last nursing home I did work at, it was not well maintained. It was not well run. A couple of patients that I got myself attached to, the nursing staff, they could not feed themselves. They had huge bed sores. The one in particular guy could not feed himself, and he
Mm.
basically literally starving. And I would go spend my time and feed him. And the bed sores, the infections, it was just a really bad place.
So you felt like then that you went above and beyond kind of your job role to help these people out when necessary. Is that accurate to say?
That's very accurate.
Right. Okay. Okay. And one of the comments that really caught my eye, Nancy, in the thread on that Facebook page was that you said they treat patients with cruelty. So, can you expand on that a little bit? What you mean by cruelty? Because that's to me, that's a little different than neglect. Or in your mind, is it the fact that they neglected them that was cruel, or were there actual instances where they mistreated patients beyond just not helping them?
Yeah, it was beyond cruelty, not taking time to feed patients, letting the patients get bed sores. The 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 gentleman that I took the time to feed, they did not time, and he was skinny. He had a bed sore. Ah, I bet it was big as brown as a
Yeah.
basketball on his buttocks, and it was exposed bones.
And
And
yeah, yeah. Go ahead, please.
the care of feeding tubes, they would let them get infected. And my grandmother was in the same nursing home, and she fell out of her bed. They let her lay there for hours.
Oh my
So
goodness. Yeah.
my
Um,
father up in the same nursing home before he died.
okay. And were you able to complain to management? Did you bring these concerns forward? And if so, kind of what was the response?
I brought it forward to management, and nothing was basically done. It was just
Was it the
a.
situation where they said, "Hey, we're going to take care of it," and they didn't, or did they just say that's not a priority? Do you remember kind of what the response was in tone, if you don't remember the exact words?
It was basically nothing was done. They knew, and nothing was done.
Okay. Is that
And
because
there
there
was
wasn't enough staff, do you feel like? Or were there other reasons, just a lack of caring by the staff that was
a
there?
lack
Or
of
what were
care.
some of the reasons?
It was
Okay.
a total lack of caring.
Okay.
Because there were 2 floors of that nursing home, and the ones that had mental issues were kept downstairs. And I went downstairs to check on the people, and one guy looked like he had been beaten. He had black eyes, bloody nose, a bloody mouth. There was no way he fell out of his chair. I did
Wow.
report that, and nothing was done. I mean, I've seen them fall, I've seen falls, I've seen injuries.
Mm. Um, that's brutal, to hear.
Yeah.
That is brutal to hear. You said, "I would not want my life to be like that." And you also mentioned, if I am put in a nursing home, evidently I am there to die and be treated worse than an animal. Can you explain why you feel that way?
Well, a lot, number one is the cost of these nursing homes. Number two is basically you're there to die. And I mean, animals are treated better. And I would go visit my aunt in the suburbs of St. Louis. And people wandering around, not knowing why they're there, crying, I want to go home. It's just a sad thing. And they are treated like animals.
Mm.
I mean, there's not enough staff. And when my dad was at the same retirement home, I would walk around. These people be, laying on a padded floor. I mean, soiled clothing and crying for help.
Now, you worked in several different facilities, and is it your experience? I mean, people in form little communities in any job, right? In any career. So it's likely you probably talk to people in other nursing homes. Was this something you heard about from other friends of yours who may have worked in nursing homes? In other words, what I guess I'm asking, Nancy, is this pretty common from your experience that you heard and maybe saw in other nursing homes as well? Is this a general problem, or do you think this was more confined maybe to a few facilities?
This is a major problem. I'm a veteran also, and I am a moderator of a Facebook page, and over, time and time again, we're veterans' homes. And I think 2019, a veteran was there dying of cancer, was had over 100 ant bites. The last one recently, I forget what state was it, was closed, was under the OIG inspection because of sexual abuse of
Mm,
elderly patients and sewer backing up in the kitchen. And it's just, if my kids are going to put me there to die, don't.
right.
Because I noticed that every nursing home facility, if they do not realize that the people, the family is not going to be there day to day, the other ones are neglected, and really, that's abuse to
So
me.
you just mentioned families. How often, in your experience, again, were the residents there in the nursing homes? How often were they visited? Were they mostly ignored even by their families, or did their families visit often? What's your general opinion of that?
The families did not visit often at all. The
Mm,
families were just MIA.
mhm.
So they did not visit their families whatsoever.
Did the patients you talked to, were they kind of wondering where their families were? Were they sort of despondent because they weren't getting visited? What were you
Always.
hearing?
That Yeah, they were always, wondering where their family was and wondered why they were there. I heard them all the time trying to leave, crying of, you know, I want to go home.
Mm. That's so hard. Did they feel like they were sort of left there and just like
Yes.
as a way for their families to get rid of them so they weren't a burden?
Well, they didn't feel that. They did not understand why they were there and they wanted to go home.
Mm, mm, mm. They must have really lit up then on those few times that families came to visit.
Yeah, they did. But most of the time, families did not visit. They would write letters. I would read them, the family's letters.
Okay. Okay.
But at
Oh, I
one
want
particular, when I worked at the Donovan Retirement Home, it was downstairs, and they let an elderly man wander off. And they found him outside. The temperature was cold. He was taken to the hospital and died 2 days later.
oh my goodness. That is just horrible. So, um, with all of that misery and bad stuff that went on, was there anything really good in those environments? Was there anything that you would praise, any sort of positives in those environments?
Well, I did several activities throughout the day. I did a coffee chat. We read the ones that were, higher functioning. We drank coffee. I read them the newspaper, got the opinions. Um, I did a little cooking thing. I cooked them, checked the dietitian what they could eat, and it was called Mrs. Food. We did activities. That was positive. And
Right.
the one I worked in Memphis, Tennessee, that was more of a positive environment. But one patient in particular, her family moved and did not tell the facility. And, it was normal for us to drop her off. And we had no problems with her, and they moved.
They
And
moved and didn't tell you.
no, they moved and they found her wandering in downtown Memphis.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. Um, eh, Nancy, I can't imagine the mindset of someone who would put a parent or grandparent in a nursing home, move and not let them know that this happened. That is, boy, that is distressing to hear. Um, did you feel that the patients there that you were working with in your experiences, did did they eventually start to give up the will to live? And if so, did it happen quickly or just did it take a long time in general?
Some it happened very quickly, and some they hung on.
Hmm. How was it? Did they express this to you in any particular ways? Could you see it in their eyes? How were you able to notice that?
Well, basically, they stop eating, they stop participating in activities, and it was just very sad to see.
Mm, mm. By the way, for anyone who is hearing the birds in the background, you have some parakeets, and so I wanted to point that out. So I like hearing it. Nice to have that around. Okay, so what would you change about nursing homes if you could? What are a couple? You don't have to give me a whole long list, but what are a couple of the key things that you think should be done to improve the situation there?
Well, I know in my state, there's only one veterans nursing home ran. So, and as far as the cost, um, nursing homes are no longer are not covered by Medicare supplements. So you're ranging on the families spending anywhere from 7,000 on up to past $10,000 per month.
Per month?
So, right, exactly.
Wow.
And most of these people who can afford that,
Right.
they're Medicare used to run Medicare ran facilities. Medicare no longer covers the cost.
Mm. You would think so if for instance my parents were in a nursing home and I was paying $10,000 a month, I would certainly expect that they were getting great care for that kind of money,
Right,
you
but
know?
they're not.
Right.
Unless you were there and they knew you were going to be there, they would take care of the patient.
Mm.
And
You men-
visit my aunt who was in a nursing home. I think it was 2017. I may not be correct about that. But once I came there to visit her, they made sure they had her taken care of.
Mhm.
It's just there's not enough staffing and there's not enough training, and it's just a really sad situation. I have a group of friends, and there is no way we will be put in a nursing home. It's just, if you're going to put me there to die, then don't.
Right.
And like my family, I don't expect them because basically to take care of an elderly person, one of the family members has to quit their job
Right.
because in today's economy, everybody has to work to make ends meet.
Right. Do you remember at your nursing homes about how many residents were there and about how many workers to take care of them? I don't know if you have any memory of kind of the rough ratio of people specifically to take care of the residents versus administrators and things like that, and about how many
Um,
people were in the nursing homes.
I am not really sure about that, but I know that as far as staff per patient, there was no way enough to cover. Why I was continuously, once I did my job, I was out on the floor.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. And according to you, a lot of the caretakers, a lot of the staff there just wouldn't go any extra mile or even do what was required. I mean that's what you're saying, right?
That's what I'm saying. And when my dad was at the same nursing home that I worked at, it it was deplorable. The situation was deplorable. He was put in a room. The air conditioning did not work. Um, he was in a coma, but I still marked the feeding tube on the bag, and I would have said something, but he was in a coma. He was just basically there to die, and they're supposed to make sure that the bag for the feeding tube did work. That it never it the I marked a line. It never moved,
Right. Right.
and I
That's
would
pretty,
find on the floor, on padded, basically it looks like a gym mat on the floor. And once I would walk in, all these, nursing home patients would come to me wanting help.
Mm, mm.
So when I with my dad,
What did the what were some of the things that the residents there that you were taking care of? What were some of the things that kind of struck you most or that really stayed with you? Either a comment to you or some kind of an action that really stood out in your mind for either good or bad?
as far as what the patients
Terms of
in
their
general.
care, in terms of, I guess, their life there. Were they talking to you about how they felt abandoned or how it felt meaningless? Kind of, what did they say anything to you as someone who plainly cared about them and wanted to help them as much as possible? I'm kind of wondering if you can get inside their mind a little bit based on what they would have said to you. I don't know if you got a lot of thanks or kind of what your interaction was with them.
My interactions with them, they basically did not understand why they were there.
Mhm.
They were lost. They cried a lot. Um, it was just really it was just really a sad situation. I enjoyed, visiting my aunt. Then I would go there, and then they would walk up to me. I would talk to them. My heart really goes out to these people.
Right.
I mean, it's just pretty much that, you know, once they see the place, it's just they basically give up.
Mhm, mhm. And that I mean, that lines up with the statistics I've seen about how it tends to shorten people's lives when they
Absolutely.
go, into a nursing home, and certainly that's what you're explaining, yeah. If someone is considering that option, Nancy, is there anything you would advise them to do to maybe make sure that they get a good nursing home? Are there any steps that someone could take in terms of in terms of looking up these places or doing any sort of research to find a good nursing home out there? Is there anything they should be asking administration or anything they should be looking for if they take a visit to a nursing home, which might indicate that this nursing home is good or bad? Any sort of indications that you can think of that might separate the decent nursing homes from the ones that don't care?
I would definitely do my research online. I would go visit unexpectedly to walk around.
Unexpectedly. Okay, great point.
I definitely would. There's a site they could find the ratings of the nursing homes. I definitely talk to administrators, but to make sure that your family member is going to be taken care of, you need to be a constant presence there. And
So
I've
that
seen every nursing home that I've been to or visited.
so that's a really good point too, I think, Nancy, that once they are there, that doesn't mean that your job as a child, a grandchild, just a friend should end. You should be following up, not just by visiting, but by checking on the conditions there, by making
Right.
sure that things are being done properly. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Um, this is so hard to discuss and to hear, Nancy, but I think it's extremely important to understand. Are there any circumstances in which you would encourage someone to put anyone in a nursing home, or can you not see any good reason at this point why you would do it?
Unless the family member is going to be there and be an active part of that elderly patient's care, I I wouldn't suggest it under any means or any circumstances. I mean, I have visited many nursing homes.
What if someone tells you I can't take care of my, you know, mother anymore, so she needs to go to a nursing home? What would you advise a person who says that?
Well, I would check out home health care. Um, I know with the Veterans Administration, they're trying to expand it. Doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But home health care.
Okay.
And if it comes to the point that they need full time all around care, I would check into hospice care.
Okay. Very, and all those are very expensive options
And they're very
as
expensive.
well. Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And so it sounds like, to kind of summarize, there's just not a lot of good that you have seen. I mean, this is just one person's story, but you were there for a while and you've seen a lot, haven't you?
I've seen a lot with different family members being in nursing home care. I've seen a lot.
Yeah. And you would just recommend, if at all possible, find an alternative. It sounds like, keep them home with you, as hard as it may be. The alternative is worse. Is that an accurate reflection of your feelings?
That is 100% the,
Hmm.
my feelings on the situation.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Because I know that male suicide rate is high and also female veterans too. So being a female veteran, and as far as the Veterans Administration taking care of the elderly, it is probably worse or just
Right.
as bad as the total population.
And there's a lot of articles on VA hospitals and care that
Yeah.
is substandard, a lot of information out there. And that's a really good point, Nancy, for veterans who are at least pretty likely to have more, maybe, psychological issues, given what they have gone through. If they've been through a war and through all those PTSD and things like that, are real and make it even harder to deal with the situation, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so you have a Facebook group and there's other online support. Is there, for nursing homes and people in this situation, that you're aware of, like places they can turn?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. Maybe that's something for, for groups to be started up out there for people who care,
It's ab-
to maybe form, groups. What do you think?
it's absolutely needed. And as far as nursing home care, I mean, like in our area, there's an article written that our population in Wyoming is aging. We don't have the infrastructure. We have no transportation means. And like I said, there's one veterans home in Buffalo, which I think is like 7, 8 hours, maybe more away from me.
Yeah.
And that has a waiting list.
Mm. Such a tragic situation. But Nancy, I really very much appreciate you coming on with me and taking the time to talk about your experiences. And there's no easy answers here, are there? I mean, the
No,
solutions are going to be complicated and expensive, any way you look at it, isn't it?
right. And as far as the people I've talked to, they said they don't want to be a burden on their family.
Right. But it's but the families, if they kind of, maybe if they knew through things like this, maybe if they understand what is then going to happen to their parents, their grandparents, their friends
Right.
who are in these places, maybe they will realize that it's not a matter of being a burden, it's a matter of helping them improve their lives.
Correct.
Of course, there is a burden. There's always a burden when you're caring for someone else, whether it's a child, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a parent. There is a burden, but I think in life sometimes those are burdens that we're supposed to bear.
Exactly.
You know, so
I
maybe,
agree.
yeah, maybe we can end it there, and maybe we can all look inside ourselves a little more and
I
decide that it's worth the effort, and sometimes huge effort and daily effort, to ensure that that older people, that elderly men and women, are worth the burden, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They definitely are.
Okay. Nancy, thank you so much for coming on with me today. I greatly appreciate your time and comments on this distressing issue, but something that does need to be discussed.
Yeah, it does need to be discussed. And I think more outreach programs, more Facebook, it definitely is a situation that has been it's been ignored for quite some time.
Yeah. We have a way to create community that we didn't have back in the 90s with the internet.
Correct.
As much as the internet can be negative, it can also be positive in that we can find other people in our situation and and talk about these issues. So maybe that's a
Right.
little ray of hope there. Let's create these communities and see if we can't change things that way.
And exactly. And a lot of people are, they're lonely. A lot of these elderly people, they are lonely.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the high rise of suicide rate among men.
Yeah.
They have lost their wives and they are lonely. So,
Let's see if we can work to make them a little less lonely.
yes. And yeah, I have a couple elderly friends that, I talk to daily to make sure they're okay.
That is so important, that contact, that connection, even saying
Absolutely.
hi, makes them feel like they are valued, doesn't it?
Right. Absolutely. It does.
And it's not that hard to do, is it?
It's not that.
It's we all have phones in our hands all
Yeah.
day now. Can't we
Oh,
use those to
that's
make a
right.
call? Yeah, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Okay.
It's
Well,
just time and carry.
it is. It is. Thank you so much, Nancy. It's just been such a pleasure to have you on.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.